archetype, is like you're able to produce more chickens, pumped full of GMO, because it's about GMO, access to GMO, the amount of chemicals you use in them, which actually brings down the price. So then you have American...
The price couldn't get much lower than it is. You look at all of the chicken that comes in from Southeast Asia, for example. I mean, I don't see how it could go down any further than it is now.
Oh, it can get lower.
You reckon?
Yeah.
Well, you see, a lot of people will say we're good because we need cheap food because there's a lot of people on a budget. So, but, I mean... What do we think Americans eat? I mean, I have been to America quite a lot. I don't ever remember being poisoned by the chicken that I eat there.
I think that you have some of the worst healthcare in the world, in the advanced capitalist world in America, and that's probably not helped by like animals being pumped through full of GMO. So, I mean, I think also the fact that it's not just that, it's that there's a geopolitical element here. Like we see Huawei, the agreement around Huawei, where they said that if you sign an agreement to build the 5G network here, that will strip you of the intelligence. So that is a form of a kind of pressure tactic.
Okay. Let's quickly go to a caller. Alex is in Watford. What would you like to say, Alex?
Good evening, Ian.
Hi.
Good evening, panel. The President of the United States is banging the table for a trade agreement after Brexit. I believe sterling will fall to a 1-to-1 ratio. Why would sterling be worth more than the dollar?
Why do you think it would fall to a 1-to-1 ratio?
Because it's a free trade, and it's trading on unequal terms. Why would sterling be worth more than the dollar?
I'm not sure that's a very good economic argument, if I'm honest.
Okay, I'm not a professor in economics.
Well, me neither. The nearest we've got is Ashok here. I mean, can you... I can't see any logic to that argument.
I mean, I don't think that's how currency devaluation works. And so I don't... it's about purchasing power. So if you're saying, okay, the ability for people, normal British people versus normal American people to buy an item for X amount of pounds or dollars, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I think it's less of an issue whether there's... I can't see why there would be a 1-to-1 ratio. I don't understand why.
I mean, currencies fluctuate. Of course, after Brexit, the pound did go down to, what was it? It was 115 or
yeah,
something.
But then the pound goes down, but manufacturing goes up. So
I think when you were in America, didn't the pound depreciate hugely at one point? Was it around 2004,
I
2005?
spent so long in America when the pound was yo-yoed against the dollar, or vice versa, depending on your point of view. I've known it when it's been almost at $2
$2.40 when I first went in 1987.
But also sometimes when the pound falls, manufacturing goes up. I'm not encouraging that, but I'm saying these are more. Yeah. There's complex scenarios in which if the pound went down, you could, like you see China right now, you see currency devaluation happening there. Not to get into a long, convoluted discussion about the currency, they actually artificially devaluate it in order to increase their exports. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to answer the question.
We're going to take more of your calls, Alex. Thank you for kicking us off. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You're listening to LBC. I'm Ian Dale. It's past 8. Amelia Cox has the news headlines.
The Queen has welcomed President Trump at Buckingham Palace for a second time today for a state banquet in his honour. Ahead of the dinner, Mr Trump tweeted to say a big trade deal is possible once the UK gets rid of the shackles and that talks are already starting. A British soldier has died after getting into difficulties while swimming in a canal in France. He'd gone over there to help mark the 75th anniversary of D-Day later this week. England have lost by 14 runs to Pakistan in their second group game in the Cricket World Cup, chasing a tournament record 349 to win. The favourites ended up falling short on 334 for 9 at Trent Bridge. LBC weather, wind and rain easing for most tonight, with clear spells developing the north and east of England, more persistent showers across the southwest and Wales, a low of 5 degrees.
This is LBC. Some people find love par chance. I found love in my Citroën dealership. I looked at new Citroën C5 Aircross SUV with advanced comfort seats, and boom! They said, pay £1,794 up front, then £299 a month for 35 months. I love it. Visit your local Citroën dealership and find love too. New Citroën C5 Aircross SUV. Citroën.
Citroën UK Limited, a credit broker, not a lender. Offer on PureTech 136 speed manual, 10,000 miles per annum. You won't own the car. Personal contract hire terms, eligibility and return conditions apply. PSA Finance UK Limited.
Muscular pain can last all day and night.
Ouch.
And Nurofen New Pain Relief can do the same. Introducing the UK's only clinically proven 24-hour ibuprofen patch. It delivers ibuprofen directly to the site of pain for all day and all Ibuprofen joint and muscular pain relief medicated plaster. Contains ibuprofen for short-term pain relief of muscle strains and sprains close to the joint of upper or lower limb. Always read the label.
At the AA, we're always trying to make your journey better. Our mechanics fix 8 out of 10 cars at the roadside, usually within 30 minutes of arriving. You could say we're simply the best. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong song. Join today from just £4.50 a month. Visit theaa.com. The AA, because anything can happen. New customers only. T's and C's apply. Being born in the USA and marrying a Galway girl may not necessarily make you walk 500 miles to a Norwegian wood like an Egyptian to bless the rains down in Africa. But if we are as open-minded, open to the world, open to new ideas as we are to music, we can all dance as part of something far, far bigger. Because we are not an island. HSBC UK. Together we thrive. And this is the end of the ad as we know it. Unlock the city with the new Range Rover Evoque. Know your side streets. From your inner city beats. Know your underbelly. And where to fill your belly.
The lamb, madam.
Know your north. From your south. Live for the city with the new Range Rover Evoque. Land Rover, above and beyond.
Meg, the driving instructor, is definitely almost 90% sure she's filing her VAT right. Kinda. But she'd be more confident with QuickBooks. QuickBooks is perfect for making tax digital and is HMRC recognized. Get up to 50% off your first 6 months. And maybe put it towards a new clutch.
Making tax digital means monthly VAT returns are changing too. Are you ready for the 7th of June? Visit quickbooks.co.uk for details. QuickBooks, backing you.
Leading Britain's conversation. Ian Dale. Tweet at LBC.
Coming up to 25 to 9 here on LBC, we're asking what sort of relationship should the UK and the US have post-Brexit. Sir Christopher Mayer is here, former British ambassador to the US. Zoe Gardner from the Stop Trump campaign. Ashok Kumar is a lecturer at Birkbeck in international political economy. I don't know why, but I find that so intimidating.
You could just say political economy.
I find it very intimidating, even though I'm a visiting professor of politics and broadcasting myself, I should tell you, at the University of Stonegate. Anyway, Errol Moorcoach is from Republicans Overseas as well. Right, I think we should go to another call. Luke is in Bromley. Hello, Luke.
Hello, good evening. Good evening,
Hi.
Professor. Hi.
That's what I'm going to be known as now, isn't it?
Prof.
Yeah. So I think one common interest that everybody has around the table, including the listeners, is we all want the best for Britain. I think I'm right in that one, right? My question to you, the panel, is how damaging could these disgusting comments be for the country and for trade?
Which comments are you referring to in particular?
Comments from the likes of senior leaders of Corbyn and Sadiq and so forth.
I mean, we should point out that the tweets that Donald Trump sent out this morning were in response to an article that Sadiq Khan wrote for one of the Sunday papers yesterday, which I think you could describe as reasonably incendiary and almost guaranteed to trigger Donald Trump. Now, you can argue that Donald Trump should have played the big man and not reacted, but that's not what he does. He always reacts. If someone triggers him, he will react to it. So how much damage could these negative comments do? That's Luke's question. Zoe?
I don't think that Sadiq Khan poking at Donald Trump's extremely thin orange skin is really going to make any difference to any trade outcomes.
But he did poke him deliberately.
He did it, yeah, and I think that that's because it's in Sadiq's interest to sort of play up again that culture war that I've been talking about, because his re-election is probably going to be based on that sort of liberal London vote. So that makes sense. I mean, you know, then we have the President of the United States calling him a stone-cold loser on Twitter. I mean, there's an element where this sort of is farcical and hilarious, but it's also interesting, isn't it, how it's very much Sadiq who comes in for the ire from the likes of Trump.
Well, he did call him a fascist almost, didn't he?
Well, yes, but they have previous, don't they, from the last time that Trump came over, where I believe, although I could have missed something, that it was actually Trump who fired the parting shots of their disagreement. So I think that, you know, I mean, then now it's who started it and so on.
Pathetic.
Well, it is
It's
pathetic.
It's
isn't
pathetic, and what the impacts of it are far less entertaining and far less sort of puerile, because what we're talking about is an argument where, I would argue almost certainly deliberately, but Trump is sort of creating an enemy out of Khan, or Khan is creating an enemy out of Trump, and either way, it becomes for many of Trump's supporters based around Sadiq Khan's Muslimness, and it plays into what I was talking about before about this racism. And especially Islamophobia that can be seen around this whole issue of the rise of Trumpery around the world.
You're going to use that, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to keep that one.
Errol, we have to, as somebody says on a text here, let's remember Trump was vile towards Mayor Khan directly after the London Bridge attacks. People have short memories. That is true. I mean, I know it's ridiculous to get into a war about who started it, but that was a pretty disgusting comment from Donald Trump after those attacks.
Well, it certainly could have been taken that way. Ultimately, this is the world of international diplomacy, and it's...
But he doesn't know the meaning of the word diplomacy, does he? That's the thing.
Well, that's debatable. His version of diplomacy is to break down the constructed order that has been in action. So his diplomacy is in some way a destructive diplomacy for a system that a lot of people have felt is broken.
Well, maybe, but in the aftermath of a terror attack like the one on London Bridge, surely most normal diplomats would have been expressing sympathy with the people of London and sending messages to its political leaders. Instead, he launched a terrible attack on Mayor Sadiq Khan, and as Zoe said, a lot of people suspect it was because of the colour of his skin.
Well, I don't think it was the color of his skin. I think that it was a long-standing back and forth between two people who have admittedly large egos. I'll agree that the comments that were made there were unrecommendable and they shouldn't have been made.
But it was also within the context of him sort of promoting a far-right, white supremacist, very Islamophobic group in the UK and their Islamophobic fake news videos on Twitter. So this isn't just a clash of two individual egos, is it? It's about Trump's attitude towards and promotion of hatred towards a specific group of people.
Well, I'm an immigrant from Turkey to the United States, first generation. The comments that Donald Trump made about Muslims through the campaign, every Turkish person behind closed doors said we understand what he's talking about. There's a larger...
Every Turkish person said
behind closed doors. We fled a country and have fled
You can't say that every Turkish person...
The majority of Turkish people who left...
I very much doubt even the majority.
The majority of Turkish people who left an Islamofascist dictatorship, which it is currently, understood the sentiments that he made. He has he has Trump towers in Turkey, for example. He has Trump towers all around.
But how does that excuse in any way his stoking of Islamophobia and racism? I mean, it's not just Muslims, it's also Mexicans, of course, who get it in the neck.
Well, 30% of Mexicans voted for Trump. The legal ones did.
30%. Again, we're not really talking about majorities there.
We're talking about a sizable block of people who feel that the illegal immigration is belittling their legal immigrant experience in the same situation that my family feels that way.
I mean, look, sorry, like, if you're talking statistics here, he's unpopular across the global south with very few exceptions. He's one of the most unpopular sitting presidents ever in American history, around the world and in the U.S., actually, right now, of any president. And if you look at the numbers statistically in the U.S., 90% of black people in America voted against him, right?
And so on the counterpoint to that, he's actually done a huge amount for African Americans. I mean, if you look at the sort of the way the economy's developed, black unemployment is at an all-time low. Well, I mean, you can screw up your face, but it's true.
Can I just sort of come back to Trump's visit to the United Kingdom?
If you must.
Do you mind?
No, do.
I was very interested in what Zoe said about sort of stoking the culture/political wars that rage in our societies, but take slightly different forms depending on which country you're talking about. Now, Trump effectively has endorsed Boris Johnson to be the successor to Theresa May. Now he's on the, as they say, the hard Brexit side. Other people say it's the pure Brexit side, but we'll put
Don't tempt me.
And I don't want to slip into Brexit, for Christ's sake. Excuse my language. And he's given, he thinks, a boost to Nigel Farage. And he's given Jeremy Hunt a little pat on the back as well along the way. Now, the question I ask is whether, if any of these three were asked before it happened, did they desire a public endorsement from Donald Trump before he arrived in the UK? Well, I do not think there would have been a unanimous reply. My question to you, Professor, is it the kiss of death? Or is it the kiss of life?
Well, the thing, what got me in Trump's comments on the Tory leadership is that he said he'd had other candidates asking for his approval. And I'm thinking to myself, who are these other candidates? Can I really imagine Sam Gimar or perhaps Andrea Leadsom ringing up the White House and saying, could you put me through to the president, please? I'd like his support to become the next British Prime Minister. It's laughable.
It's false.
It's completely false. And this is where, Errol, this is the problem with Donald Trump is... Sometimes some of us who are considered to be on the right of politics would quite like to believe what Donald Trump says, but we can't bring ourselves to because he tells so many untruths.
When it comes to the large issues, he tells it how it is. When it comes to navigating the complexities of today's political climate, especially campaigns, I agree. He stretches the truth, and he does it because that's the environment we're in. He broke down a two-party oligarchy, and to do that, you had to have some extremism in there, or it would never have happened. And there's growing pains and collateral damage when things change, and that's how the world works.
Interesting text here from Peter, who says Trump is not orthodox. You either love him or you loathe him. But what he is not is a fake politician giving fake promises. He's a businessman who loves America and is making it great again. Unfortunately, some people can't get their heads around this. Loving one's country and putting its people first. I think it's called nationalism, something our spineless politicians have lost. And you see, that's where he does appeal to a lot of Nigel Farage supporters, I guess, Ashok.
I mean, if we look at the policies he's put forward, they are reactionary and chauvinistic. I mean, putting children in cages. You could say, to some degree, Obama's administration they weren't separating families. And so this is a kind of misnomer. People are like, he's just continuation of that policy. Saying that we're going to kill the families of terrorists. Of course, there's a continuation there of Obama basically droning entire villages. But saying something explicitly and implicitly, there is a difference, right? So the racism that is explicit, you have far-right groups in America that he says, both sides, there's bad people on both sides. So that kind of politics appeals to the Farages of the world and the supporters of that party because it's basically otherizing or marginalizing the already marginalized.
Well, you see, again, you're grossly generalising there. I voted for Farage's party in the European elections. I don't recognise anything that you've just said as something that I would go along with.
I wouldn't say that every one of Nigel Farage's supporters are reactionary, but I think that to them, racism is probably less of an issue than, say, supporters of Jeremy Corbyn.
That's hugely insulting to millions of people to basically accuse them of being pseudo-racist.
No, I didn't accuse them of being racist. I said that I'm saying in the priorities of issues, would you say that racism is front and center in most of the people? Can you honestly say that the issue of racism is front and center, or opposing racism is front and center for the majority of Farage supporters? I think you got to be honest here.
Front and centre is getting out of the European Union. That is front and centre for people who voted for his party.
Yeah, but I think it's really interesting that, again, just bringing it back to what we were saying earlier about the NHS and that being on the table within these trade talks, because somebody like, was it Paul or Peter or
Peter,
Mark or John, who texted in and said, that he respects Trump for his nationalism. Yeah. And, you say that you voted for the Farage party. This nationalism, does it extend as far as, the NHS? Because we know that what Farage's history on the NHS is very checkered, right? So we're not really sure where he stands, but he's definitely said some things that suggest that he doesn't particularly support it, right? And what Trump supports, to come back to your point earlier, is doing for somebody like Farage or somebody like Johnson is forcing them to entrench themselves on one side of this cultural divide and forcing them to entrench themselves on a no-deal Brexit position where the NHS will be...
of this cultural divide.
You don't think that we're in the throes part of a culture
Well,
war.
I think you're kind of almost encouraging people to take part in a culture war because virtually every answer you've given talks about a culture war.
Yes,
I don't
because I
feel
think that
I'm in
right
a
now
culture
this
war.
is what characterises the narrative of our public conversation and of our politics, and that we keep hearing about it from Brexit to just more generally the open people.
But Brexit isn't part of a culture war. Brexit is just because
Of course
people want to leave.
Brexit's part of
No,
a
it's
culture
not.
war.
It just people want to leave the European Union. They don't see it any wider than that.
I'm not sure that that's really the case.
Well, how is it part of a wider culture?
Because people don't want to leave the European just like that.
They do actually, which they had 3 years ago.
No. I mean, they want to leave the European Union for a reason, one or another, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. That corresponds to a wider moment we're having within British and, I would argue, European and wider politics.
But you're impugning motives into people's decision to vote to leave the
Yes,
EU,
people
which I
have
don't
motives
believe. Which I
behind
don't
their
believe.
votes. I
with
haven't
that.
impugned any specific motive into any vote, but I have said people had motives for voting one way or another.
We've got to go to a break, I'm afraid. Keep your calls coming. 0345 6060 973. It's 8:48.
Eddie Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. on LBC.
Do you think Nigel Farage would be a good Conservative leader?
I think we have plenty of talent in the Conservative Party.
Do you think he'd be a good Conservative leader?
When you look at the job that's got to be done, that's irrelevant.
Well, what about winning elections? That's quite useful, isn't it? And this new leader, this fresh lick of paint, will be chosen by a very narrow electorate. You're likely to get a more extreme version of Brexit than the country might want.
Eddie Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. LBC.
Join me, James O'Brien, for my new podcast series, Full Disclosure. I'm away for a bit now, but returning with a host of guests, including Chris Moyles, Damon Albarn and Catherine Ryan. Join me again on Monday the 10th of June, when my guest will be Bill Nye. Don't forget to listen and subscribe on Global Player or wherever you get your podcasts.
Unlock the city with the new Range Rover Evoque. Know your side streets. From your inner city beats. Know your underbelly and where to fill your belly. Know your north from your south. Live for the city with the new Range Rover Evoque. Land Rover, above and beyond. Muscular pain can last all day and night. Ouch! And Eurofen's new pain relief can do the same. Introducing the UK's only clinically proven 24-hour ibuprofen patch. It delivers ibuprofen directly to the site of pain for all day and all night pain relief. Nurofen Joint and Muscular Pain Relief Medicated Plaster contains ibuprofen for short-term pain relief of muscle strains and sprains close to the joint of upper or lower limb. Always read the label.
We use the internet all the time. We can't help it. But isn't it annoying when it's, a bit slow? BT Superfast Fibre is so reliable it now comes with its own Stay Fast guarantee, which means we'll give you £20 back if your speed isn't everything you've been promised, morning, noon and night. For fast all the time, not just some of the time, search BT Broadband today, tonight or tomorrow. BT. Be there. New customers, we guarantee the speed to your hub. £20 if you can't fix in 30 days. 4 claims a year, exclusions apply.
Sharing credit card details on scraps of loose paper. Finding battered receipts in the wash. Stressing out your accountant. Expense management doesn't have to be stuck in the dark ages. Say hello to Soldo. Company cards that do your expenses for you. Give your team prepaid cards to simply spend, snap the receipt, and that's that. Spend smarter. See the light at soldo.com.
Where are you? I've got a surprise for you.
Oh, that's nice.
Hey, look out the window.
Okay.
Ta-da!
What on earth is that?
It's a mobile home. You said you always wanted one.
Mobile phone. I wanted a mobile phone.
Oh, right. I've sold the house now.
Should have gone to Specsavers for rechargeable hearing aids. Now from £1,395. Ask in store for details.
Ian Dale, text 84850. This is LBC.
It's 9 minutes to 9 here on LBC. Well, the Queen is on her feet speaking at the state banquet. Let's just dip into a little bit of what she's saying.
Every year, there are almost 4 million visits by Americans to the United Kingdom. with a great number claiming British descent. And with your own Scottish ancestry, Mr. President, you too have a particular connection to this country. We are also bound by the strength and breadth of our economic ties as the largest investors in each other's economies. British companies in the United States employ over 1 million Americans, and the same is true vice versa. Mr. President, as we look to the future, I'm confident that our common values and shared interests will continue to unite us. Tonight we celebrate an alliance that has helped to ensure the safety and prosperity of both our peoples for decades, and which I believe will endure for many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you all to rise and drink a toast to President and Mrs. Trump, to the continued friendship between our two nations, and to the health, prosperity and happiness of the people of the United States.
Well, the assembled 170 guests, they're just on their feet now, raising their glasses to the President and Mrs. Trump, and we're expecting to hear from President Trump in response to Her Majesty the Queen's speech in just a second. Let's come out of this for a second, and we'll go back to it when Donald Trump starts speaking. We're asking what sort of relationship should the UK and the US have post-Brexit. I'm going to apologise immediately because we are going to have to stop our discussion in a second and listen to what Donald Trump has to say. Christopher, you're a veteran of these state banquets and occasions of high pomp and circumstance. What are you expected to hear from Donald Trump?
I have to disillusion you and say I've never been to a state banquet, but that apart...
What are you here for?
Well, exactly, I know. To devise on the menu. He's got a choice. He can say something very brief and anodyne and sit down. Or after the gaffe he has made, I think, with those newspaper interviews, he could use the moment to say something rather well considered, rather well crafted, if he's prepared to take that advice, if there is an advisor around prepared to give it. I'll be interested to see which way he jumps.
Errol, do you think he's capable of taking advice?
I think in these sort of circumstances, yes. When he's in charge in his own office, I think he goes the way he wants to go. But this is a special circumstance and a special relationship.
Oh, you see, you just had to do it, didn't you? Do that, yeah. Ashok, what are you expecting to hear from Mr. Trump?
I mean, I'm hoping he says some wild and outlandish things.
All right, well, let's see what he's going to say. Donald Trump at Buckingham Palace now.
Be your guest for this historic state visit. Thank you for your warm welcome, for this beautiful weather, your gracious hospitality, and Your Majesty's nearly 7 decades of treasured friendship with the United States of America. This week, we commemorate a mighty endeavor of righteous nations and one of the greatest undertakings in all of history. 75 years ago, more than 150,000 Allied troops were preparing on this island to parachute into France, storm the beaches of Normandy, and win back our civilization. As Her Majesty remembers, the British people had hoped and prayed and fought for this day for nearly 5 years. When Britain stood alone during the Blitz of 1940 and 1941, the Nazi war machine dropped thousands of bombs on this country and right on this magnificent city. Buckingham Palace alone was bombed on 16 separate occasions. In that dark hour, the people of this nation showed the world what it means to be British. They cleared wreckage from the streets, displayed the Union Jack from their shattered homes, and kept fighting on to victory. They only wanted victory. The courage of the United Kingdom's sons and daughters ensured that your destiny would always remain in your own hands. Through it all, the royal family was the resolute face of the Commonwealth's unwavering solidarity. In April 1945, newspapers featured a picture of the Queen Mother visiting the women's branch of the Army, watching a young woman repair a military truck engine. That young mechanic was the future Queen, a great, great woman. Her Majesty inspired her compatriots in that fight to support the troops, defend her homeland, and defeat the enemy at all cost. We also pay tribute to Prince Philip's distinguished and valiant service in the Royal Navy during the Second World War. On D-Day, the Queen's beloved father, King George VI, delivered a stirring national address. That day he said, after nearly 5 years of toil and suffering, we must renew that crusading impulse on which we entered the war and met its darkest hour. Our fight is against evil and for a world in which goodness and honor may be the foundation of the life of men in every land. This evening, we thank God for the brave sons of the United Kingdom and the United States who defeated the Nazis and the Nazi regime and liberated millions from tyranny. The bond between our nations was forever sealed in that great crusade. As we honor our shared victory and heritage, we affirm the common values that will unite us long into the future: freedom, sovereignty, self-determination, the rule of law, and reverence for the rights given to us by Almighty God. From the Second World War to today, Her Majesty has stood as a constant symbol of these priceless traditions. She has embodied the spirit of dignity, duty, and patriotism that beats proudly in every British heart. On behalf of all Americans, I offer a toast to the eternal friendship of our people, the vitality of our nations, and to the long-cherished and truly remarkable reign of Her Majesty, the Queen. Thank you.
Well, I'm tempted to stay for the national anthem, but I'm not going to because I want to get some quick reaction from our panel here. So, Christopher May, you have to leave us in a moment. Former British ambassador to the US. Very uncontroversial speech that ended rather more quickly than we'd thought.
Totally uncontroversial, not too long. Sorry, not too long, and touching every base that an American would believe that such an audience would want to hear. So all the reference points were perfect. It was well crafted within a very limited, a very narrow, what's the word, canon.
He played the diplomatic game, basically.
He absolutely did. So,
so he's capable of it?
Of course he is.
Yeah.
Which is why the stuff last week was deliberate.
Well, Christopher, we're going to let you go now.
Thank you.
My other three guests are going to stay for a little bit as well. But let's go to the LBC newsroom. It's 9:01.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, America's first family are dining with the Queen and senior royals at a state banquet in Donald Trump's honour. The president arrived at Buckingham Palace for a second time today in Marine One, around 30 minutes behind schedule. LBC's reporter Lucy Hoff is there.
The President will be served steamed halibut, Windsor lamb and a pudding of strawberry sablé, the menu personally chosen by the Queen, who was presented with 4 options. The banquet is taking place inside the Buckingham Palace ballroom, attended by senior royals including the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. They're joined by the Prime Minister Theresa May. Lucy Hough, LBC, Buckingham Palace.
The Queen addressed guests ahead of tonight's dinner. Her Majesty paid tribute to the strong relationship between the US and UK during her speech welcoming President Trump.
Mr. President, as we look to the future, I'm confident that our common values and shared interests will continue to unite us. Tonight we celebrate an alliance that has helped to ensure the safety and prosperity of both our peoples for decades, and which I believe will endure for many years to come.
Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has boycotted the banquet and will instead address protesters in London tomorrow. Thousands of people are expected to make their way from across the country to the capital as Mr Trump heads to Downing Street for talks. Protests against and in favour of the president's visit have also been held today. A 30-year-old arrested at Gatwick Airport this morning has been detained under the Mental Health Act. Police were called after a man tried to walk through security with a kitchen knife in each hand. The suspect was tasered. It's not being treated as terrorism. A court in Sweden's ruled Julian Assange should not be detained in relation to a suspect rape case. The WikiLeaks founder is currently in jail in the UK for skipping bail after he was removed from the Ecuadorian embassy in London in April. He's always denied the rape allegation. And Andy Murray will compete in the doubles at the Queen's Club Tennis Championships later this month. He recently said he was feeling pain-free after undergoing a hip resurfacing operation in January. The LBC Markets report the FTSE 100 has ended the day up 23 points at 71.84. The pound buys $1.26 and €1.13. LBC weather, wind and rain easing for most tonight with clear spells developing in the north and east of England. More persistent showers across the southwest and Wales, a low of 5. Tomorrow a mix of sunshine and showers heavier over the southeast, a high of 22 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Coggs.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 4 minutes past 9. You're listening to LBC. I'm Ian Dale. As if you needed proof that you can't please all of the people all of the time, here are 2 contrasting texts reacting to Donald Trump's speech at Buckingham Palace. Paul says, overwhelmed that a moron could read the words somebody else wrote for him. P.S. Leftovers for food banks, ? Paul, near Kingston-on-Thames, however, says elegant, affirming and heartfelt speech from the Donald. Our panel, minus the Christopher Mayer, are still with us. Errol Moore-Coach, who's from Republicans Overseas, Ashok Kumar, lecturer at Birkbeck in International Political Economy, and Zoe Gardner from the Stop Trump campaign. Zoe, I can imagine which side you fall down on that, but he did actually stick to the diplomatic niceties this time.
Yes, he did. I mean, it would have been possibly entertaining, but in a sort of horrifying way if he had actually
if
gone on.
mentioned the words Brexit.
Exactly. So I think even a man such as him can manage to keep it together when he's literally standing right next to the Queen and just say what's been written on his notepad by his advisors.
I suspect it was partly going through his mind was what would my mother have said if I'd done anything that the Queen wouldn't like.
Maybe
we
so.
all think that from time to time, don't we? What would our mothers think? Ashok, your reaction to what you just said?
I mean, it's impressive that he was able to read a sheet of paper that a child could read. I mean, I'm impressed by it. Maybe he would just go off script. But I wanted to say it does kind of reinforce, to be a kind of party pooper here, but it does reinforce this kind of special relationship narrative. And I think that narrative really, like Christopher said, needs to be kind of countered. If being part of World War I and World War II creates a special relationship, then we'd have a special relationship with Russia. But we don't. So I think that to me isn't enough and actually what it was common interests, and that's how we have to see it now, because if we keep saying the special relationship thing, then it forces us to do stupid, immoral and unjust things.
And it is interesting, isn't it, that actually if you look back even in comparatively recent history, the special relationship works for both countries when they want it to work for both countries. And of course, when America invaded Grenada in 1983, Margaret Thatcher was absolutely furious and let Ronald Reagan know it. There's that famous picture of him holding the phone sort of away from his ear because she was shouting at him so much. And this whole idea that a special relationship means that the junior partner is always a poodle to the senior partner does not have to be that way. It can be that way, as I think we have seen it on one or two occasions, but it doesn't have to be. Errol, what did you make of the speech?
Well, he historically has always mentioned that his mother, as a first-generation Scottish immigrant, Marianne MacLeod, had a strong respect for the Queen. So I think that, if anything was passed down to him, it was a pretty vanilla response, stuck to the script, didn't go anything that was controversial. I was low-key worried that he might invite them to his golf course, and since he didn't do that...
Do you know, he invited me to his golf course once.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I interviewed him in 2012, and he invited me for a round. Hasn't delivered on his promise, typical politician.
I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you, shocked.
Mind you, I played golf on Saturday and did my back in, so it's probably a good thing. Let's look forward to tomorrow very quickly. Zoe, tell us what's going to happen tomorrow in terms of the demonstration.
So tomorrow we're planning, as I said earlier, a carnival of resistance. So we're planning a big, loud, and very diverse and creative demonstration that is going to start at 11 a.m. at Trafalgar Square. But it's also, if you go to stoptrump.org.uk, you can see that there's loads of different smaller demonstrations taking place all across the country. So if you can't make it to London, do check out what's going on in your local area and join one of those. We're hoping to see tons of those hilarious homemade banners again. We've also got loads of brilliant sort of musical acts, spoken word acts. We've got the chicken block, the chlorinated chicken block. So we've got a dance routine from full chicken besooted folks. We've got a samba band.
You've taken a few leaves out of Extinction Rebellion's book here. This is not a normal kind of political protest anymore. I'm not criticising it.
I think it's a fair point, and I've been asked that a lot. Actually, to be honest, that last year's protest, last July, which was absolutely massive, if you'll remember, it was also along the same sort of lines. But I think that, yes, the Extinction Rebellion model has been really effective and has been really interesting. Actually, we're working with the UK climate strike movement, the children who've been walking out weekly from class in order to demand that politicians take action for their future and for the climate crisis that we're facing. And they're going to be holding an open mic session in Trafalgar Square. And as I say, we're going to have loads of sort of performances. We're going to have, the Baby Blimp is coming back. So it's going to be... and I really love how that one really sort of gets up people's noses.
And Jeremy Corbyn will be speaking under it. What more could you possibly want?
Vince Cable will be speaking to, and Caroline Lucas will be speaking to. So obviously, we've got a selection of cross-party politicians, so it's not a party political event in any means. But obviously, as I was saying earlier, this does cross across all the parties, and there's plenty of people who in the Tory party used to criticise Trump, who now obviously, given their uncomfortable situation at the moment of his arrival, don't feel able to do that. But it is an event where everybody is welcome as long as they oppose Trumpism.
I have to thank you all and say goodbye. Thank you very much, Zoe Gardner, Errol Moorcoach, and Ashok Kumar. Very good to have you in the studio with us for the last hour and a quarter. Now, for the rest of the programme, for the next 50 minutes, I want to continue talking about this visit, but I want to look at the fact that Jeremy Corbyn announced this afternoon